Wilfred Burchett was an Australian journalist who has become internationally recognized. He was an unusual Western reporter who lived together with Vietnamese guerrillas in the northern mountainous stronghold and the southern frontier of Vietnam during the wars against the French and the American troops. Wilfred Burchett and his family were extremely dedicated to the Vietnamese people's independence struggle and maintained a close relationship with the late Vietnamese President Ho Chi Minh. His son, George Burchett, was born in Hanoi 1 year after Vietnamese soldiers scored a landmark victory against French troops in Dien Bien Phu Valley. After spending the first 2 years of his life in Vietnam, George and his family moved to different countries including the Soviet Union, Cambodia, France, Bulgaria, and Australia. George Burchett has become a renowned artist with various artworks showcased in different parts of the world. In 2006, he returned to Vietnam for the first time and settled in Hanoi with his own family in 2011. Since then, George Burchett has been creating unique artworks inspired by Vietnamese history, particularly legendary stories. Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam. Vietnam is increasingly popular among foreign friends from around the world, but not many of them were actually born in Vietnam and created artworks featuring Vietnamese history and culture. In our program today, we will have a conversation with George Burchett, an Australian artist and a special friend of Vietnam. Hello George, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, you were born in Vietnam, then returned to Australia and came back here in 2006. So could you share with us your feelings and your thoughts when you came back here?
I was born here 1 year after Dien Bien Phu, and so my first 2 years were in Hanoi, in Vietnam, with my parents, of course. And then I lived in different countries like USSR and Cambodia and Paris and Bulgaria and then Australia. But Vietnam was always in the part of my life because my father was a journalist and he reported the Vietnam War, and he reported it on from the Vietnamese side, from the Ho Chi Minh side, so to speak. So Vietnam was always I grew up with Vietnam, but coming back in 2006 was like coming back into something that I knew, but also I didn't know. So it was, and it felt very much like also like home, because I met so many people who knew my father and who respected him and loved him. So it was a very warm feeling from as a human experience, but also I fell in love with Hanoi, with the physicality of Hanoi, because there were bits that I could sort of remember in the old Hanoi, but also the vibrancy and the excitement of a new Hanoi. So it was for me it was amazingly not just positive but inspiring experience. So I was, and it was finally I was in the place where I was born for the first time in my life.
Your father devoted a large part of his life to Vietnam. So how do you describe his influence on your life and your work?
Well, the influence was in many ways, because he was a journalist, so we followed him wherever he went. Also, he had some, because of his support for Vietnam, for the North Vietnam, he was a little bit in conflict with his own country, Australia, which supported the Americans. So it was of course it affected me, but his love of Vietnam and his passion for Vietnam and for the just cause of independence and unification was shared by all our family. And Vietnam, through my father, and was a very important part of my life. And also, because he reported he went to the jungles with the Viet Cong. He was in Hanoi when Hanoi was bombed. So I was also seeing the photographs and the films he made and reading the articles. So we were, the struggle of Vietnam was very much part of my formation as a person.
So you have been living and creating artworks for years now in Vietnam. What are your sources of inspiration here?
2006 I first came, and then I went back to Australia, and I came back here in 2011 actually to organize an exhibition of my father's photographs of Vietnam for his centenary at the Ho Chi Minh Museum in Hanoi, and then Ho Chi Minh Museum in Ho Chi Minh City. And that was also a very important experience for me, and on that basis I decided to stay and worked on a film project about my father. And of course, as an artist, I am inspired by everything I see around me in Vietnam, but also I'm very interested in the history of Vietnam and the many heroes that Vietnam has produced throughout its history.
On the occasion of the 2017 Lunar New Year, George Burchett welcomed his close Vietnamese friend, sculptor Đào Châu Hải, to his house. Đào Châu Hải is one of the leading contemporary Vietnamese sculptors who has studied and created artworks in various places, namely the Soviet Union, France, the United States, Taiwan, and Singapore. He found a like mind in George Burchett with constant creative endeavors and his deep love for Vietnamese culture and history.
Trong những cái sáng tác hội họa cũng như điêu khắc cũng như đồ họa mà chúng ta có thể thấy được trong cái xưởng làm việc này của George ấy, thì đại đa số những cái cảm hứng, cái tư duy và cái ý tưởng của ông George đều xuất phát từ những cái vấn đề lịch sử Việt Nam trong quá khứ cũng như trong cái thời hiện tại ngày hôm nay. Thì đấy là một cái điều mà tôi quan tâm, và tôi thấy rằng là ở ông ta có những cái điều rất khác biệt so với những cái nghệ sĩ nước ngoài đã sang Việt Nam, làm việc ở Việt Nam, tham gia vào những cái trại sáng tác, tham gia vào những cái workshop rồi những cái symposium ở Việt Nam, thì hầu như là họ rất ít những cái tiếp xúc và những cái hiểu biết về văn hóa, về lịch sử của người Việt.
In recent years, George Burchett focused in studying and depicting Bà Triệu, a legendary female warrior who has become a source of pride for many generations of Vietnamese people. With his pictures and sculptures, George Burchett seeks to visualize the beauty of Bà Triệu as a symbol of patriotism, women's freedom spirit, and the bond between elephants and Vietnamese people over thousands of years.
Thực ra George làm rất nhiều nghiên cứu và biểu hiện rất nhiều những cái đề tài khác nhau liên quan đến văn hóa và lịch sử của người Việt. Nhưng mà đặc biệt gần đây nhất thì ông ta quan tâm đến lịch sử Việt Nam thông qua cái hình tượng là Bà Triệu. George có tiếp xúc nhiều với nghệ sĩ Việt Nam, tham gia nhiều những cái hoạt động nghề nghiệp với các nghệ sĩ, xem rất nhiều những cái triển lãm. Thì George có nói rằng là ông ta cũng cảm thấy có một cái gì đấy mà ở nghệ sĩ Việt Nam rất ít quan tâm đến cái lịch sử của chính cái dân tộc mình. Họ quan tâm nhiều đến cái thời hiện tại hơn. Cái điều đó cũng là tốt, nhưng mà nó có vẻ như cái gì đấy chưa đủ cho một cái quá trình tư duy nó dài hơn, nó giúp cho nghệ sĩ có thể đi xa hơn, giúp cho nghệ sĩ có nhiều cái cảm hứng nó sâu sắc để mà nhìn về hiện tại và phát triển trong cái tương lai. Đấy là George nói và trao đổi với tôi như vậy. Tôi hoàn toàn đồng ý với quan điểm của George.
A primary topic of your artworks is Bà Triệu, who was a legendary Vietnamese female warrior. So why are you attracted to this figure?
I went to visit the Hai Ba Chung temple in near Hanoi about a couple of years ago, and I'm always interested in sort of heroes, since I was a kid. But usually my heroes are riding horses or something like that. Well, suddenly I had this wonderful image of women riding elephants. So as an artist, that appealed to me. So I did some research on the Hai Ba Chung, the Chung sisters, and I discovered this extraordinary character called Ba Chiu, who is extraordinary for what she did as a, in the struggling against the invaders, but also her whole character and for the way she's described physically as a kind of giant riding an elephant. So it inspired me both purely as an artist, as to put a woman on an elephant. I think it's quite fantastic, but also for what she expresses, what she symbolizes in terms of the history of Vietnam, but also the legends of Vietnam. But through her, I also got interested in the elephant as such, because while researching Ba Chiu, I realized that there is the elephants of Vietnam have played a very important role in the history of Vietnam, with the Hai Ba Chung, Ba Chiu, but also they helped the resistance in the war of resistance against the French and against the Americans. And when I did a bit of research on elephants, I realized that actually the situation with elephants now is quite tragic, because they're almost on the brink of extinction. So the way the elephants helped the Vietnam through the struggle, I think it's almost a patriotic duty of every Vietnamese to save the elephants, but also to focus a little bit more on the environment and all the issues related to that.
So how do you get information about Ba Chiu to feature her in your works?
Well, first I was researching the Hai Ba Chung, the Chung sisters, and then I stumbled upon Ba Chiu, as most of us do, reading about her in Wikipedia. And there was a wonderful wonderful essay by American historian David Ma, one of the most prominent historians of Vietnamese history. So that got my interest. Then I researched some more. I read from Mr. prominent Vietnamese historian, Mr. Huy Ngoc. Then I even discovered that my father had written about Ba Chiu in his book about the history of Vietnam. And it's not a big story, actually, Ba Chiu. I mean, she was a big lady, but her story is quite small. But somehow, as a symbol, it is quite extraordinary. Ba Chiu stands out because she was, because of what she said, because she rebelled not only against the invaders, but also against the oppressive sort of traditional society. And that was almost 2,000 years ago, which to me makes her a kind of modern girl.
And finally, could you share some information on the main activities that you plan to do in Vietnam in the coming years?
Well, I have a number of collaborative projects that I want to do with my colleagues, including Mr. Dao Chao Hai, who we interviewed before, and I also have a film project that is focused on the environmental issue, and so the art and the topical issues are sort of coming together, both in sculpture and drawing, but also as a film project. So I can see a lot of work ahead in Vietnam, and it's important for me to feel that I'm in my country, but also to contribute to not just the artistic, but also to some topical issues that I think everybody should be concerned with and aware of.
Well, George, once again, thank you so much for joining us today and share with us some very interesting information.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for coming to my studio.
Well, that's all for our Sharing Vietnam today. Hopefully, the audiences will enjoy more and more artworks featuring Vietnamese history and legends created by local as well as international artists. Thank you so much for watching and see you again next time.